This is the Arlington County Board of Equalization hearings. There are 4 board members present, so there is a quorum and 6 cases on the agenda. The first case is RPC 34020-300 at 2100 Crystal Drive. I will note that Mr. Yates has joined us, so we now do have all 5 board members present prior to this case starting. So now, Ms. McCraw, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about the property.
Thank you very much and good morning. The subject property is an existing Class B office building located in the National Landing submarket of Arlington and originally built in 1968. As a brief history of the subject, which is outlined in more detail beginning on page 35 of the BOE memo, this property was one of the first to participate and earn approval as part of Arlington's new adaptive reuse project. The site plan outlining the property's conversion from a 249,000 square foot office tower to a 344 key hotel was applied for in December of 2024 and approved by the county board in July of 2025 as part of Arlington's new adaptive reuse project. Subsequently, the subject property was purchased for $8 million on December 9th, 2025. Only a few weeks prior to the 1/1/26 date of value for tax year 2026, and this value represents our requested value for tax year 2026. To give a quick overview of the sale process, Newmark was retained by JBG Smith to conduct the marketing and sale efforts for the property beginning in the winter/spring of 2024. Newmark conducted outreach to 22 best-in-class investors and developers initially. Following those efforts, 11 firms actively participated in the sales process, and 3 qualified bids were ultimately received. At the end of that, JBG Smith awarded the sale to the highest bidder in June of 2024. On page 39 of the BOE memo, you can find signed testimony from Newmark outlining these efforts to, quote, ensure a thorough, transparent, and market-driven process. So once new condo documents and a new condo map was recorded and site plan approval was obtained in the summer of 2025, the sale ultimately closed at the aforementioned $8 million sales price in December. Despite the widely marketed arm's length transaction that did close in the month immediately prior to the date of value for this tax year, the assessor still originally enrolled a figure of $17.2 million, or double the purchase price for tax year 2026. On page 54, you can see the initial value. The way that this was valued was the Arlington Assessment Office automatically enrolled their site plan approval methodology to initially value the subject, assessing the property at a value that equated to $50,000 per approved key per the site plan, with a nominal $1,000 improvement value included. However, in March of 2026, following this initial value enrollment, Arlington County issued an own motion to revise the tax year 2026 assessment. This revised value can be found on page 52 of the memo. This revised assessment figure of $44.3 million reflected a value that is over 5.5 times the value of the arm's length purchase price of $8 million. After initial review of the appeal, the assessment office did reduce their opinion of market value to $23,704,400, which will be presented today. However, this value is not only still above the initial proposed assessment value of $17 million, it still also falls at a value that's nearly 3 times the December 2025 purchase price of $8 million. So far, there have been 3 different values introduced by the assessor to value this property for tax year 2026. All of which are at best at a value double the December of 2025 purchase price of $8 million. To date, and what you can see in the BOE memo, we have been fully compliant and transparent with the Arlington Assessment Office regarding the details of this project and overall sales process. We've provided all the sales documents, including the closing statement, letter of intent, the PSA, and all amendments, and have also included signed commentary from the broker themselves outlining the sales timeline and the bidding process. So to summarize, we simply ask that the board enrolls the purchase price of $8 million as the best indicator of fair market value as of 1/1/26. This purchase price represents the fair market value of the property and its current use, which is a vacant, dilapidated office building approved for conversion into a hotel. This transaction, again, was widely marketed by a reputable broker It received multiple bids and was finally awarded to the highest bidder at that $8 million value, just prior to the data value of 1/1/26. To close with my final couple minutes or so, I will let the ownership representative from 2100 Crystal LLC give his closing thoughts. So if Taylor's online.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. As Liva just outlined well, we entered an agreement or were awarded the deal by the seller in June of 24, and then ultimate to contract in August of 24. After that, Amazon is slow hiring in their travel. We had Doge, government shutdowns. The property today realistically would be worth less, and construction costs have continued to escalate. The property today would be realistically what we could probably pay for it would be less than the $8 million we paid for it in December of this past year. In addition to that, we did continue on. We did move forward with this project subject to the CMRI process and the approval of the site plan, which was huge. Without that, this building has no value to us or any other hotel developer, certainly. It's a great project, a great process. And with that process, we're now able to move forward with the hotel project and bring the tax value of this building back up. But had we known that the building would be assessed at a multiple of what it actually is valued to us or to the market, it would mean that we could actually pay less for the building, right? Because what we could pay for the building was a function of what the other costs are, hard costs, soft costs. So our soft costs, AKA also are inclusive of property taxes, is higher. That means the building's worth even less. And that means the next developer that's looking at an adaptive reuse project is not going to be able to pay as much for the building. It's further bringing down the values of these existing obsolete structures and disincentivizing anybody from pursuing an adaptive reuse project. So there are a lot of people watching this and other similar assessed value processes because that has a huge impact on whether or not other adaptive reuse projects go forward and the future property tax values go up. So I just would encourage you to think about not just our project, but others in the way that this project is viewed, because this project is worth a lot less to us if the assessed value process is going to be a multiple of the value of the building. We're as Liva said, at 17.2, that's more than 2x the property taxes we thought we would have to pay during our process. So anyway, we appreciate the opportunity to discuss the case, bring all the facts forward, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chikas for the county, please.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, board members. Good morning, Liva. Good morning, Grant. Good morning, Taylor. We're going to start essentially with the process of how these properties are going to be valued and remind the board that this is actually something they've seen before. We've actually had, while the term adaptive reuse is new and essentially as of this last year, 2025, the Department of Real Estate Assessment has valued other properties in a similar fashion. Those that were approved vis-a-vis special exception for redevelopment, but those properties where the improvements were of the essence of the redevelopment, a la Arlington Court Suites, essentially 1 or 2 blocks behind Bosman Building, and previously the Keybridge Marriott site, where both projects were approved for redevelopment, but the improvements were of the essence of the redevelopment. So the county, the department actually valued the improvements vis-a-vis the cost approach to value, and then applied the land value based upon the land rates that were in effect as of January 1. So the overall valuation method is actually not new. The terminology is in the sense of an adaptive reuse property valuation. The appellants alluded to 3 different valuations that we put on it. Well, one was a mistake in the sense that there were no improvements valued. It was an interim de minimis value of $1,000. I think we can all agree that the existing improvements were worth well over $1,000. So we did issue a own motion to correct that. Our most recent version is essentially an acknowledgement of the correct belief that we were actually valuing them incorrectly, in the sense that we should be valuing the improvements based upon the cost approach to value, but based upon the improvements that they are approved for. In this case, this is a office shell that was then approved for hotel improvements. So What we did was we had our cost estimate subject matter expert to go ahead and do a revised estimate reflecting that this is now a cost estimate based on the building as a hotel. The land is still the land. That's the approved land rates that were in effect as of January 1st each year, $50,000 per key. And then the improvement values are going to be based upon the shell value of the improvement that sits as of January 1. And as I understand it, it's been essentially depreciated and stripped down to essentially shell value. There's nothing there to indicate any existing improvements that were there other than the walls, the floor plates themselves. I think the only things that were added were sprinkler systems and the existing elevators, as those will remain in place. In regards to the sale itself, we did appreciate the outreach made by Lib and Grant and the team there in regards to offering us the opportunity to talk about it. We did have questions in regards to if there was an appraisal involved. Apparently there was not. It must have been a cash purchase, or at least no third-party appraisal was requested. We did ask about the marketing efforts. They shared those with us. We also then looked at the sale itself and just found that it's just low. For those that have been involved with the county for as many years as I have, and I believe as many of the county board members have, to find a sale of an office commercial property at $8 million is tough to find. And so what I did was I looked through these sales in 2025. Anecdotally, we found that there was actually a single family property that sold for more. It sold for $9 million. And again, I know we're talking apples to mangoes, but this is still the idea of market value. We had a condo that sold for 50% of the $8 million achieved for this commercial property. When we looked at just office sale properties in 2025, we found this was the third lowest achieved in Arlington in 2025. The only other two, the one was sold for $6 million in January of 25, but this was a 4-story brick facade office with 30,000 square feet, as opposed to, again, the subject of almost 300,000 square feet. This equated to a per square foot average of $195. This was set for redevelopment to self-storage by right by the owner. $6 million. The lowest was $5.85 million achieved in December of 2025, and that was for a 2-story office strip, 20,000 square feet, which equated to $289 a square foot. We talk about the idea of this was market value. This was the marketing that was done. These were the buyers that came in to make offers, but there's still an idea of an outlier. And what that essentially means is an outlier commercial property sale is a transaction with a sale price per square foot or total value that significantly deviates from the local market norm. And that's where things, where we kind of look at this. One of the testimonies of the appellant was that this is representative of a highly vacant office building that was approved for redevelopment. But as we've already heard in the testimony, and as we'll again point out, this actually goes back some year, almost 16 months, 13 months rather, before this was approved by the county board for redevelopment. There was essentially an agreement placed, a letter of intent that they would purchase this at the price of $8 million well before this was approved for development. So it essentially was pre-negotiated. We can't use the term that it was regardless of this development was approved, but if this was approved, if this was negotiated and agreed upon before the approval was in place, that's almost the definition of cart before the horse. One of the things we noted as well was that the timeline that was presented by the appellants saw that the Newmark suggested that marketing effort of 2100 took place in the winter of 23, spring of 24. We then noted that JBG sold Crystal City Marriott to Dauntless, the same owner of this property, in November of 2023 for $66 million. At the time of that purchase, JBG was quoted as saying, quote, "The sale of Crystal City Marriott, JBG's final remaining hotel asset, signifies another step in our capital recycling plan. We continue to advance our shift to a majority multifamily company by way of strategic non-core asset sales." 7 months later, the letter of intent was signed between Dauntless and JBG. for this property. We then looked upon the success of JBG in this exact area, 2200. JBG within one block has the Grace and Riva twin towers that they built themselves. Half a block to the west, they have the Zoe and the Valen, two twin towers that they built themselves. Then they asked for approval to do two more conversions at 1801 and 1900 South Bell. So essentially they have 6 properties, 4 of which are currently in operation, 2 of which are expected to be on the crane in the coming year. And we asked why, at least amongst ourselves, why did they take an $8 million sale for a hotel, limiting their buyer pool, when they are, as they note themselves, a leader in multifamily? It doesn't seem, especially considering again that they had this pre-negotiated $8 million in place before the approval. Why take the approval if they didn't have to? That being said, we do ask that the county board, the Board of Equalization, approve our revised value of $23,704,400. Do we have remaining time? I don't know if that was Rosa or I heard someone.
No, you're out of time. Thank you. Okay, questions from board members now, and I'll start. Mr. Cheekas, there's a lot of terms, and then just to clarify for the board and anybody else that's listening, we've got the term adaptive reuse site. We've got the term special assessment for redevelopment, and then site plan. So can you speak just to clarify the difference or the similarities between those 3 and how they generally are assessed?
Absolutely, yeah. So they are somewhat similar in the sense that anything outside of by right needs to get what's called special exception approval by the county board. The terms 4.1 and special exception are necessarily synonymous, but the term adaptive reuse is a new policy that was set in place, I believe it was late 24 for the 25 year. And the key functions there are the difference in that there's a faster approval process. The site plan 4.1 can take as much as a year or more. The point of the adaptive reuse was that this would be taking place within a 4 to 5 month time span. The reason to do that was to reduce the time in the entitlement phase, cut carrying costs, and the financial risk for developers. So it was set specifically to help the absorption of those properties, office properties that were 50% or more vacant, and would switch to other adaptive use, using the building envelope as the ground level for any sort of adjustments.
Okay, and then a follow-up. So just to clarify, so adaptive reuse sites are assessed similar to how site plans are assessed based on the future use?
Yes, with the caveat being that as we spoke about specifically, if a 4.1 or special exception has a improvement that's in place that will be there after the development, they're valued the exact same way, in that we use cost approach to value and the existing land rates that are in effect as of January 1.
And a final question on this topic. So all of the adaptive reuse sites are assessed the same way, so they are equalized across the county?
That is correct. Every site plan adaptive reuse has been valued vis-a-vis the cost approach to value representing the improvements and the current land value that's in effect as of January 1.
Okay. All right. Other board members' questions? No? Mr. Pace.
Yeah, mine is to the appellant. Is the idea that you guys are going to continue with this reuse plan?
Yeah, and I'll take opportunity to just dispel. The contract was subject to the site plan approval. If the site plan approval had not gone through, the sale would not have gone through. The documents clearly show that. Everyone has those documents. So in other words, the whole reason that we paid $8 million for the property is because it was approved. Had it not been approved, the sale would not have gone forward.
Okay.
And to some of the alleged or implied, the discussion related to another sale, nothing in the document, and nothing shows that it was marketing the winner of 23.
Excuse me. I'm going to interrupt you here. You can discuss that in your wrap up, but you've answered the question. Okay,
Yeah.
any other board questions? Mr. Yates? Turn your microphone on, please.
I'm looking, Chris, I'm looking at page 2. And, I'm, looking at the numbers and how they're breaking down a little bit. The 50,000 per key, I get it. Yeah, and that's, you're going for the idea of going forward. The revised cost approach of existing hotel improvement, the 6,500,000. How is that relating into the value per key? I mean, is that because it's not saying the existing, it's saying the hotel improvement itself. How explain these numbers a little more for me, please?
Sure. So as was explained in regards to the equity argument, all hotels are going to be valued vis-a-vis the price per key as of January 1st. So that's how we get the
Right.
50,000 per keys. The improvements are going to be starting on page 6. And again, what Ms. Roskin, our appraiser, did for the cost approach is looking at the Marshall and Swift cost estimate. So we're looking at the materials used, the cost of labor in Northern Virginia, et cetera, and then appreciating that amount. And that's essentially what we were talking about earlier, in the sense that what we're trying to capture is that there is a value. Clearly, there's a value of 295,000 259,000 square feet of concrete pour and National Landing. So what we're trying to do is capture that value, the structure that exists now, before it is converted to hotel use, as far as all the floor plate changes they're going to make, the additional room, essentially turning it into a hotel that they'll operate in 27 or thereabouts.
Which is the 50,000 per key.
Exactly. So that's the basis for the land value, is the 50,000 per key. The basis for the improvement value is going to be on the depreciated amount of the physical structure that's there January 1st.
Okay.
Okay, any final questions? No? Okay, Mr. Chikas, if you take a minute to wrap up then.
Yes, ma'am. So just to clarify again, these are one of 5 properties approved for adaptive reuse for January 1, 2026, all valued the exact same way vis-a-vis the land value that's in effect January 1, and the depreciated improvement of the structures that's physically there as of January 1. We've spoken to the potential low sale price achieved as being an outlier. It's come nowhere near close to any of the sale prices that were achieved in Arlington 2025. Based on the equity argument alone, we do believe that the county should be approved at the revised value of $23,704,400. Thank you.
I just want to also note that this property was marketed specifically for hotel use. It limited the pool of potential buyers. As noted, there were 22 investors, 11 were participated, only 3 bids received. And so we also believe that that also impacted the sales price. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, and Ms. McCraw, if you take a minute to wrap up.
Yes, thank you very much. Just quickly, the assessor did mention that we can all acknowledge that the improvements are worth more than 1,000. We have a sales price that represents the value of both the land and improvements as of 1/1/26 of 8 million. It was again widely marketed. There were multiple bids, and ultimately it was awarded at the highest bidder. I also want to just bring some precedent here. This case is unusual, but it's not unlike any other sales price cases that have been brought forward to the board. In June of this year, National Gateway was reduced to the sales price. In October of 2025, Boston Gateway was reduced to its purchase price. In August of 2024, Roslyn Overlook and Roslyn Gateway were reduced to this purchase price. This is the same fact pattern here. This property was widely marketed. A market value was established here by the sale of $8 million, and it ultimately closed just a month before the data value. So we do ask that the board considers this and the precedent set in previous cases and enrolls the purchase price of $8 million.
Okay. Thank you both. All right, it's just among the board. Where are folks? Mr. Mendez.
I think ultimately our goal here is to determine what the value of the property is on January 1st of the tax year. And, typically there's not a sale, so it's hard for us. Sometimes we have to move some things around. But there is a sale here, and it appears to be an arm's length transaction. There were 3 bids, and it is a unique project. The adaptive reuse is something I don't think we've seen yet. At least I can't remember seeing something like this. So, I mean, the sales price is half of what the land value is, or less than half of less than half of the value. So I am having trouble going with the county's number. I think it's closer to the sales price, if not the sales price.
Right. The only thing I would say that this is not similar to just a parcel of land here in Arlington. I mean, this is, the adaptive reuse, which gets assessed on the same premise that a site plan does, and it's based on what its use is. So it's not the same as just having a property, that has a building on it and it got sold for $8 million. Then I would tend to agree with you. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like as long as they're all being assessed equally, this is no different than a site plan. It's certainly, the reuse hasn't been abandoned to go back to its existing use, that it would be assessed on, the value. I think, I don't know, with the land being at 17 million and the appellant's asking for less than half of that, I think that's absurd myself. I mean, even just that argument in itself. But go ahead, Mr. Mendez.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but the sale was contingent on this adaptive reuse going through. So I think, that kind of encompasses all that. I get what you're saying, but I just have trouble going with, 3 times what it's sold for. And ultimately the taxpayer is going to be improving the property and will be getting the tax value back up. So hopefully this is just a small, it'll probably just be down, not for very long. So, they'll,
Okay.
yeah.
I would just ask you then, how is this different from a site plan that has, we're gonna, put up whatever, ABC, and it's, different from what's existing there. And they say, oh, due to interest rates, we're holding off.
I
They're
think
not
I would-
abandoning it. Same
Mhm.
thing here. They're not abandoning this. They purchased it for the reuse.
If it was a site plan and it was assessed for 24 million and there was this arm's length transaction for 8 million, I think I would feel the same way. It's just such a,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Other folks? Mr. Penaranda.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Mary. I don't think this is any different than any site plan approval. The adaptive reuse, I think was, specifically enacted to expedite the process. But and I don't know if the sales price would be a total indicator for me, because specifically if it was only marketed for hotel use, because if it was marketed broadly or even to reuse as an office building, I would feel different about that. But just limiting the target of buyers that they were seeking for, just for hotel use, and to go back to that sales price that it was contingent just on that, I don't think that would, to me, it's an indicator of the actual value of it. So yeah, I'm okay that I think this should be assessed to equalize with any other site plan on the way that the county did.
Okay. Mr. Yates, you have your hand up.
Well, I understand where the appellant's coming from, and Johnny, where your position is. But if this was a condo building, we would have X dollars per unit and $1,000 per land, and that's what we're doing. That's what the county's working at, and that's what equalization is. This is, yeah, 6.5 million, the 50,000 per unit key. I understand where they're coming from, and I get it, but I can't see that it is exactly what you're saying, Mary. It really comes down to, it's not any different than another project. And we have a lot of projects come before us on site plans and things that the value's higher than what they paid almost all the time.
Okay, Mr. Pace, did you have something?
I'm pretty much completely with Mendez on this one. I think the beauty of a redactive reuse is that it's quicker, and so to me, it makes sense to go with the 8 million. And as they finish the project by next year, we should have a higher value that should speed this along. So I would be voting with the appellant on this one.
One last
Okay, Mr. Yates?
comment. To the county, I really think the idea of encouraging the redevelopment of the site, I think they should have been a little more lenient in how they approach this assessment. But I can't see, I do feel that they're right in exactly what they've said. I don't agree with what they've said, but I understand how they came up with the numbers. I think they should have come up with something better. It would encourage development or redevelopment.
All right.
Anyway,
With that being said, then I'm going to move to accept the county's revised number of 23,704,400. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion, a second by Mr. Penaranda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, it's 3-2 without Mr. Pace and Mr. Mendez. The county's revised number of 23,704,400 has been confirmed. Thank you all. Next, do we have Mr. Warren?
I'll be taking this case. Jeremy Chidlick.
Okay. Okay, next case is RPC 34020299 at 2200 Crystal Drive. Mr. Chitlick, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Thanks. And I have someone with me. Matt, can you turn your camera on? And if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Good morning, Matt Ginnivan. I'm EVP and co-head of development with JBG Smith.
I know there's a lot of talk about JBG and what they're doing. We have as you said, the co-head of development here. Happy to answer any questions. This case is very similar to the case we just heard. It's next door. It's the same age, the same builder, the same construction, the same everything, but it doesn't have a sale and it's being converted into an apartment building. Like the last case, the assessment came out at $15,211,000. We then received an Arlington County owned motion to take it to $54.8 million. And then, so when we appeal, the value is 54.8. As you go through our appeal packet, we talk about how wrong that is. And I think the county's recognized that 54.8 is no longer a number they're supporting. So a lot of what we say is telling you what's wrong with 54.8. And we recognize that the county has adjusted from that. We met with the county and appreciate that, the county and the county leadership, along with JBG, to tell them about the project, to talk about the adaptive reuse. In the last case, it was mentioned that this is how we do all the adaptive reuse, and I believe there's only 5 of them, and I think you might be hearing all 5 today. If I know we represent 3 of them, so this is not just a long-standing, this is how the county does it. The county started doing this for adaptive reuse in March after the valuation was done. So it is, I think, important to understand this is how we do it for all site plans. This is very different than a site plan, and I'm not as qualified as Matt is to tell you why, so I'll let him talk about that in a moment, but I just want to hit a couple key points. This property is being redeveloped into an apartment building. The reason it's being redeveloped and not torn down and rebuilt is because there's retail on the ground floor. They can't just tear it down. It is a very different market to, hey, I want to build. Think about a home. A home builder can build a house on a piece of dirt. If you had a basement tenant and a dilapidated building on top of it, it's a very different buyer pool for that. Obviously, we feel that because JBG just sold the neighboring property that's nearly identical to this one for $8 million, the value should be valued similar. But more importantly, the owner executed terms with a third-party financial institution for capital to fund the adaptive reuse of the property, and both parties have agreed that the property is worth $5.3 million. That is for the land and improvements. That has been set in the final development budget, and the respective funding commitments were based off of this value. The result of the total development budget with land improvements, hard, soft, and finance costs is $90.3 million, or $463,000 per unit. There's sales of assessments of market apartments that support the 463. But if you took the 53 as a start and then added $90 million to build it, all of a sudden you're saying that this building that was built in the 60s or 70s that has been converted from an office and apartment is now worth close to $800,000 per unit, which no apartments in the county are worth it. So I think it's worth doing a sniff test to say, does this make sense? Matt's the expert here. He's developing the thing. He knows this better than all of us. So I'd like to kick it to him just to talk about a couple points.
Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, we are asking for a revision to our assessment here. And I think as Jeremy's outlined, one of the primary reasons that it really is not market-based, both for 2200 and honestly for 2100, which you heard above. I wish it was true that they were worth more. And I heard a reference to them being outliers. In both cases, we really extensively marketed both of these assets and tried to achieve the maximum values for both. For 2200 specifically, we engaged JLL and over a year-long process of looking for equity investors and construction financing. We received similarly 3 offers, and we picked the investor we picked offered the highest land value of $5.3 million. That value was then validated by our construction lender, BNY, and their independent third-party appraiser. And the comment around outliers, I do just want to provide some context. I think that, as most of us are aware, we really are in Arlington County facing an unprecedented crisis in commercial office vacancy. Our vacancy rate is now north of 21%, higher than it was in the wake of BRAC. And it was really in recognition of that Arlington County passed the Commercial Market Resiliency Initiative, the Adaptive Reuse Ordinance, which is the tool that allows us to unlock sites like this. And that's really key, is that it's the tool. In terms of the market trend and it being an outlier, when we acquired the portfolio of National Landing, there was 6.5 million square feet of office in the portfolio. We demolished 1 million square feet of that. Chris referenced 1900, Zoe and Valen. Those were the buildings that we demolished, the office buildings, and then built net new high-rise residential. That left us with 5.5 million square feet. We have now taken another 1 million square feet offline because it's not only vacant, it's functionally obsolete. And 2200 is a perfect example. This building was built in 1968. It's almost 60 years old. The office improvements are fully depreciated. It is unleasable at any rate. We have 4.5 million square feet left in our portfolio. Of that 4.5, we still have 1.2 million square feet of vacancy. So this idea of office buildings, this price representing a new low per foot, this is not an outlier. This is really a mark of where things are coming. We, I think, are uniquely positioned in that we're able to take our lumps and move on. I think that there are a lot of other buildings that are stuck right now between lenders that are underwater, and you just haven't seen those prints coming, but they are coming. And adaptive reuse is the tool that allows us to solve that. And that's why we pursued it here on 2100, 2200, where we had 500,000 square feet of vacancy. But critically, it's not vacancy we can tear down and start new. I wish we could. We also got a new building approved over at River House, and that's a mid-rise building, wood frame over concrete podium. I wish I could build that here. It's about the same cost. There are some savings in some areas, added cost other areas, but it's just simpler. You're purpose building it. The total budget for both projects is almost identical on a cost per unit and a cost per foot. But we can't build new here because these buildings sit on top of operating retail with long-term leases and a parking garage that's shared by the entire block. But we don't want to just leave 500,000 square feet of moldering, obsolete office dragging down the neighborhood. We wanted to breathe new life into that. And adaptive reuse is the tool that allows us to unlock that, but all of that comes with a cost. The county has referenced the value of the structure. Right now, we have our general contractor on site X-raying the structure. We don't have to do that when we build new. The reason why we have to do that is because we have to put 1,000 new penetrations in the structure. This 1968 structure that I promise is fully depreciated. It was not designed or built for residential use. It does not add economic value to residential use because there's no place for the toilets, the dishwashers, the washing machines, right? All of those, we need to plop new risers. The facade, we want to reuse the facade. We want to salvage as much as possible. But there's one problem with the office facade, which is that when people are in their apartments, they like to be able to open up the window. And this office building doesn't have operable windows. So we have to go and replace a third of every pane of glass with a new operable window. So even those parts that we are reusing, they don't convey value. And then for the parts that we aren't reusing, there's this added cost of deconstructing and removing all of the old office improvements. So the sprinkler system, it doesn't work for a residential system, but it doesn't mean we just have to install a new residential. We first have to demolish and remove the residential. The mechanical ducts,
Time
they're
is
all
up.
routed. Okay, sorry. But anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to present today and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, we'll love questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chikas for the county, please.
Yes, ma'am. So again, very much the same case, or very similar to the last case we just heard, in that again, this is valued the exact same way as other adaptive reuse. And again, to restate what we said in the last case, this is not new to the department in that we've had previous properties that were approved vis-a-vis 4.1 site plans that have been valued with the improvements in place and the current land value in place. Again, Arlington Court Suites, Keybridge Marriott were at least two, if not others. I think National Science Teacher Association building was another. In regards to this particular building, again, as we've seen our last case, this was approved for redevelopment through the adaptive reuse subsection of Virginia Code, Arlington County Code, approved by the county board to develop 195 high-rise metro accessible units. As we talked about in the last case, that means 195 units at that $78,000 metro high-rise land rate, and then the revised cost approach of the existing multifamily improvements. As we talked about in the last case, we did initially put out an assessment with $1,000 interim improvement value. Obviously, that was erroneous. We ran a cost estimate showing the value of the property, but unfortunately, we kept that as an office shell. We then revised that, as you see with our revised value, to reflect a apartment shell. As we talked about in the last case, again, this is using a very standard Marshall and Swift cost estimator, accounting for the materials in place as well as the labor rates. And as noted by the appellants and as noted by the department, this is heavily depreciated. Our appraiser used 79% depreciation. And again, we just ask, I think as the appellants use the sniff test, does it seem likely or not that in a value for an existing building in National Landing, metro accessible, would be worth less than $8,378,300? As testified by the appellants, apparently they've chosen a value of $5.3 million for both the land value and existing improvement value. But I believe as the testimony was, as they came up with that themselves, the lender and equity underwritten value, there's no necessarily formula as far as how they came up with that, what percentages improvements, what percentages land, what that would equate to as far as the land value, land rate. But again, based on what we've seen on sales in the county, based on our market studies that we've done, that's just too low at 5.3 million. Given the, essentially the argument is that the building next door got 8 million, so that should be our value. As we've already discussed, the building next door was approved for a hotel use, a vastly different market than the multifamily and Arlington's commercial portfolio. That being said, again, based on the equity argument of valuing the property based on what was approved for with the enhanced density approval by the county board, based on the fact that we're valuing all of our properties in the similar nature, 195 units at 78,000 is 15,210,000. Our revised cost approach to value less depreciation, again, 79% depreciation, listed an existing multifamily improvement value of 8,378,300, indicating a total value of 23,588,300. That would be the value we'd ask the county the Board of Equalization members to approve as far as our proposal. I would allow the rest of my time if Ms. Callie or Mr. Bailey want to have any words.
I just wanted to respond to some of the comments from the initial 8 minutes. The department does agree that the building is not currently a residential building. The assessment does not assume a completed apartment project. It recognized that the property consists of a valuable metro-accessible development site together with an existing structural shell that is capable of supporting an approved adaptive reuse project, which is what this is. The question is not whether the additional work is required. The question is whether the property was worth what the property was worth as of January 1. The market value of the property includes both the approved developmental rights and the remaining contributory value of the existing structure. I also want to say that if these costs were known, obviously that the plumbing, the kitchen, the windows were known at purchase, and they would be reflected in the purchase price and development analysis used by the buyer. That's all I really have to add to that. Did you want to speak to the sales price per square foot, Chris? Okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, just as far as the indicated price per square foot, for this one, I believe.
The property is assessed at $73.93 per square foot. Sales of adaptive reuses came in around $90 to $123 per square foot.
Correct.
And the county is available for questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Yates.
Chris, the appellant brought up the cost of, like the windows, the entire sprinkler system and demoing what's there, putting in new, reinforcing the structure itself for the different use. I don't see where the county's really kind of accounted for some of that. How do you see that?
Well, that would be correct, because I think as Ms. Kelly was just pointing out, as of January 1st, what we're doing is valuing the depreciated shell that is existing as of January 1st. We're not looking into the future costs of construction, which again is the very much the same way we look at site plans. We don't include the cost of future development costs, demo
Fair.
costs, any of those things. This is
And
essentially what is the value of the structure as of January 1, depreciated to 79% and then stripped of all materials, I think everything except for elevators and the sprinkler system.
Okay.
Mr. Yates, can we take a shot at that?
Yes, but I kind of think I know where you're going to come from, but go ahead.
All right. Briefly,
Sure.
Mr. Chitlick.
They're valuing the land as a residential development and then adding that depreciated office building on top of it, which you can't do both. You can't have a depreciated office building with all those things he's talking about with the land.
This
That's
is
that value.
incorrect. This is incorrect. We've stated time and again, we're valuing this as an apartment shell. We stated very
Correct.
clearly that we erroneously valued as an office, then corrected that in a revised estimate, which is now an apartment shell. We've stated that time and again.
But Matt's saying the apartment shell things all have to be redone. They have no value.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just what
All
I'm saying.
right,
It's
that's
just,
been
it's not.
stated. Okay, folks, that's been stated. We got it.
Okay.
Other questions from board members? No? Okay, Mr. Chikas, if you take a minute to wrap up then.
Yes, ma'am. So to be clear, this is valued as a apartment shell, 79% depreciation, which gets us to 8.378,300,000. We value the apartment land, 195 units at $78,000 a unit. That equates to 23,588,300. This is our proposed revision. This is what we would ask the board to confirm. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chitlick, if you take a minute then to wrap up, please.
Thanks. I'm going to try to go quick. The problem with adding the apartment shell is they're adding an apartment shell, but all of that stuff needs to be removed. So they're adding things like there's apartment windows, but then the developer's saying, I can't use those windows. Those all need to come out. So the department shell thing needs to be pulled off. You mentioned the sales of adaptive reuse, 3600 Wilson, which is built in 1999, which is at Wilson Boulevard, 1320 North Courthouse, which is built in 1990, which is on Courthouse Road, and the building directly next door that was built on the same time by the same person with the same development, the same everything, which is the one that sold for $32 a foot, which you already heard about. He mentioned the Keybridge Marriott's how we did it. The Keybridge Marriott is going to be 5 residential buildings and a new hotel on that site. It's a completely different animal. We met with the county leadership twice, along with JBG, and sent 4 follow-ups saying, hey, anything you need, anything you want, you understand our valuation better, anything we can get you, please. And the last response was, as we told you, we're working on a new value will be coming. The new value was this reduction from the original, but the notion that they don't know how he got there doesn't land well, because we begged them multiple times to, what could you need to get this number right? Yes, this is how they did it for everybody. There's 5 of them total. They started this year after the valuation. And I think you're hearing all 5 today. Just because that's how they did it for everybody, everybody's agreeing they did it wrong. If you value this as an income approach, if you valued it as an office building, and you were able to get $40 rents for the vacant space, the value would be $13,656,000 using the Arlington guidelines. Now you're saying, hey, the apartment's gone and just the land.
All right, thank you. Okay, it's just among the board. Where are folks? Mr. Penaranda?
Sure. I mean, I don't see this case any different than the previous one, except that the sale happened before the adaptive reuse. We've seen several properties in the same situation where the site plan was approved. There was one Columbia Pike where they bought it for a lower price, and all of a sudden it's, once the site plan is approved, it's valued twice the amount that they paid. So I'm okay with the revised assessment that the county has.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, Mr. Pace?
I mean, I think I look at it as it's an 11-story vacant building, and the value should be exactly the same one as the previous case. So I would suggest it should be $8 million, not the 5.3. But both of these situations, we're picking and choosing what the future blah blah blah. But as of January 1st, it's an 11-story vacant building. We have historical, or not, the previous case shows that it's an $8 million value, so this one should be similar.
Okay. Mr. Mendez or Mr. Yates? Mr. Mendez?
Yeah, I think the main, I have less angst about this one because there's no sale. Of course, the sale was right next door, but I really think the big issue is with the revised cost approach for the existing multifamily improvement. The appellant saying we can't use this, the county saying, maybe they can. So I think there's definitely a flaw with that way of valuing things. I think it should be more precise and maybe broken down a little easier for everyone to understand. But I think it should be lower, but I don't see where I could move it. But I do agree it should be closer to where Mr. Pace is.
Okay, Mr. Yates?
Well, all these cases, I have a lot of angst over it. And I think that the county itself should be encouraging this to get done and get these properties up and running in a good, proper revenue generating manner, a little more than they are. But the fact is, and the most I could say is what the value is of this existing building. If there was any adjustment I could make, that would be it, is reducing that. And then that may leave it with just the value of the units. But the problem is that we're facing, and Johnny, this, Silas, we're if I vote that direction, it reverts back. That's just the reality. I don't see that I can come up with a number other than just the straight 78,000 per unit.
Okay, oops, sorry.
Go ahead. I don't have anything else to say.
Mr. Mendez?
I was just going to say, I think that's a great idea. Even on the last case, I wish we had thought of that. Maybe if we could kind of meet in the middle. I just feel like it's so far apart that just, doing the land plus I think 1,000 would be a normal site plan. Is that correct? I'm not sure. I think that would be more in line with what the market is paying. I mean, next door we have that sale that's confirmed. So I'm with you, Mark.
I don't think that gets us anywhere.
Okay, Mr. Penaranda?
Well, one thing to note between this one and the previous case, the $8 million, I don't think has any relevance to this one, because there's a different sales price on this property of 14,850,000 as of January 2025. And it's a different use. You know, the previous case, they bought it as a specifically to use it as a hotel. And it was marketed to be able to use only for that purpose. So yeah, I don't think they're the same. But again, I think to equalize with site plans and everything else that we've seen before, I think I'm with the county.
Okay, so Mark, where are you?
I like the last one. I don't think we have a choice. I think we have to go with this, even though I don't think it's correct.
Right. Then I will go ahead and move to accept the county's revised number of 23,588,300. Do I have a second?
I will second it, but is that the number or is that the 23,916,600?
No, I'm showing,
I'm seeing 23,588,300.
Yeah,
that's
that's what I,
Yeah. That would be the number you're voting for?
yeah, 23,588,300.
Okay.
Are you seconding that, Mr. Penaranda?
Yes, I'll second it.
Okay, a motion and a second on the table. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, it is 3-2 without Mr. Pace and Mr. Mendez. The county's revised number of 23,588,300 has been confirmed. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay, next we keep Mr. Chicas, and do we have Rebecca Miller?
I'll be presenting for Rebecca.
Okay, all right. Okay, next up is RPC 1401970, Economic Unit at 3601 Wilson Boulevard. Mr. Warren, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to start on page 154, which is our summary of facts for this property. This is the third adaptive reuse case you'll hear about today. This one in a slightly different location is in the Ballston, Virginia Square submarket. It's located at 3601 Wilson Boulevard. It's comprised of 7 RPCs and was originally assessed at $7,670,300. Similar to the previous 2 cases, in March, the county issued own motions to increase that value to $28,318,400. Now, the county is recommending a revision to $23,916,600 following the appeal that was filed to the board. The value that we're asking for from the board today is $14,850,000, and that is based on, again, a market sale of the subject property that occurred in January of 2025. This property was originally built in 1999. It is, or formerly was, a 103,233 square foot commercial office. It was approved for adaptive reuse in July of 25 following the sale to convert to mid-rise apartments, 94 total units, and 5,637 square feet of retail. The property includes an underground parking garage with 207 spaces, and it's located within a block of the Virginia Metro Station. Again, I know that the county has made reference, at least in the first case and the second case, to well, this is how we apply these values based on the site plan approvals that are in place, and they're based on sales. And we thought the first sale was too low. Well, this is a second now sale that's indicating a significantly lower value than the current assessment. This property was 100% vacant, essentially, and it was 100% vacant last year as well. About 93% vacant in 2025. In 2025, the county valued this as a mostly vacant office property and assessed it at 14,631,600. So again, the actual purchase price here, the market purchase price of 14,850,000 is right in line with what the county's assessment previously was. This property, we also provided an appraisal from CBRE, which had a value indication, a least fee value indication of 15,150,000 as of November of 2024. Again, which supports the actual sale price of 14,850,000, and well below the current assessment of 28,318,400. So again, this is another adaptive reuse. It has an actual sale, a market sale, and that is the best indication of value, is the sale of the subject property for the land and improvements as of the valuation date, January 1st, 2026. With that, I'll close a little early, and happy to answer any questions that the board has.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chikas for the county, please.
Yes, ma'am. We'll actually start kind of tailing on what Mr. Warren said. Apologize. Good morning, Mr. Warren. What Mr. Warren said in regards to the sale price achieved being indicative of an empty office. And in fact, he brought up the 2025 valuation when it was valued as an office. The value of 14,631,000 was achieved through it being 91% vacant and receiving over $10.6 million of below the line adjustments to account for all the vacancy. So if that is true, that the buyer was looking this as a 91% vacant office, that would be an indication of why that sale price was achieved. Even that low sale price was some 50% greater than the $8 million that was achieved on 2200 Crystal Drive. Again, we'll bounce back to the idea behind how we value these properties, being again consistent. We look at what was approved. We look at what was in place as of January 1st for the land value, and value the property in regards to the shell condition. In this case, again, reflecting a multifamily or apartment shell. You know, one of the things we noted in the appraisal that was concluded was something specific, where they came up with what was called a value in place for the sales comparison, but then also indicated a insurable replacement cost value, good bit greater than the 15.15 million. The insurable replacement cost came up to 41,200,000. I thought that was an interesting term because it sounded a lot like our cost approach, which is the replacement cost new less depreciation. So we looked into insurable replacement cost and found that the term is a insurance term that is the estimated dollar amount needed to rebuild or repair a damaged physical structure using materials of like kind and quality at current market labor and materials. It excludes the value of the land and covers only the physical assets. So we went ahead and looked at what that value would indicate. 41,200,000 insurable replacement cost assessed by the appraiser at 21% depreciation, which is what the county used in our cost estimate, equated to $8.6 million. You take that off the $41,200,000 insurance replacement cost, you get to a value of $32,548,000. That would reflect the improvements depreciated. You add back the land of $7.67 million, that equates to $40,218,300. That's a good bit higher than our proposed revision. And that's one of the things I think we wanted to point out, was that even in the appraisal provided by the appellants, it seems to indicate a larger value in regards to the replacement cost new less depreciation. One of the things we also kind of found fault with was that even though the appraiser noted that Persinger intends to convert the building into 96 residential units, they did not apply a cost approach to indicate that the existing improvements had value. noting, quote, "The cost approach is not applicable in this estimation of market value due to the age of the improvements and the amount of depreciation present, including external obsolescence from market conditions." As indicated by Mr. Warren, this property is extremely well located. It's within a half a block of Virginia Square Metro, about another half-mile walk to Ballston Metro, within access to Clarendon Metro. So I don't know what external obsolescence and market conditions would rely, but we've been consistent with how we value this property in regards to our values. We pointed out that in the, as appraiser's own remarks, the insurable replacement cost is actually higher than our cost estimate. So we do believe that our value, our proposed value of $23,916,500 should be confirmed. I would like to yield the rest of my time to Ms. Kelly.
I just want, is it time?
Time's up, yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, that's not what I should have. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? No? Okay, any final comments, Mr. Chicas?
Again, just to reemphasize that we've done this consistently with how we value our other adaptive reuse properties, recognizing the density that was approved by the county board. This property is extremely well located, and the appraiser's own insurable replacement cost indicates a value higher than our proposed value. We asked the board to confirm $23,916,500. Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Warren, if you take a minute to wrap up then.
Yeah, so I mean, we agree the county's methodology has been consistent with these adaptive reuse, and out of 2 of the 3 cases that we've presented or that have been presented today, we've shown 2 of them that have market sales in the last calendar year that support a significantly lower assessment value. These again were market transactions for both the land and improvements, and are the best indication of fair market value as of the January 1st, 2026 valuation date. So we would ask the board to consider the sale price in their consideration for the 2026 assessment of the subject. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, just between the board members, where are folks on this one? Mr. Penaranda?
Again, same as the previous 2 cases, and to be able to equalize with everything that we're doing, I think I'm okay doing confirming what the county has for the revised assessment.
I assume this is similar, Mr. Yates. Where are you?
I think in the same place. I don't see what else to do.
Okay, Mr. Pace and Mr. Mendez? Mr. Mendez?
Yeah, I have less of an issue with this one. It sold for just under 15 million at the beginning of the year. The adaptive reuse was approved in July, so that flipped the value. So I'm actually more okay with this one, definitely.
Okay, Mr. Pace?
I'm with the appellant on this one, just based on 2025 being close to the value that the building was before. So same issue with the reuse, applying a future value to it.
Okay. All right. Does somebody want to make a motion, or I can make the motion? Somebody?
Sure, I'll move that we reduce the assessment to the proposed amount of $23,916,600.
Okay, do I have a second? Okay, Mr. Mendez is a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's 4-1 without Mr. Pace. The county's revised number of $23,916,600 has been confirmed. Thank you both. Okay, we lose Mr. Chicas temporarily and we pick up Ms. Shuttlesworth. Okay, next case on the agenda is RPC 32024002 at 2300 24th Road South. Mr. Warren, you can start with your 8 minutes on this property.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to start on page 45 of 113 of the county's board response memo. This is our summary of facts for the Dolly Madison Apartments located at 2300 24th Road South. It consists of one tax RPC currently assessed at $111,101,200, $307,000 a unit. The county is currently recommending no change. The value we're asking for from the board today is $97,058,400 or $268,000 a unit. This is an older property, originally built in 1967, most recently renovated in 2007. 12-story high-rise apartment, 362 total units consisting of a mix of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom apartment units. The property does contain an updated lobby and reception area and a small convenience store, clerkless kiosk on the first floor. And although the property was renovated or has been back in 2007, it does retain the original structural elements, exterior design, and materials and foundation. Reverting back to page 3, which is the county's income and expense summary sheet, you'll see 4 columns and the prior 4 reporting years in columns A, B, C, and E for 2022 through 2025. The county's gross potential income that you can find in column D, which totaled $10,454,500, was quite close to the actual GPI that was reported in 2025 of $10,392,224. Now, upon filing the appeal as well as the updated signed I&E survey for 2025, the county increased their test column GPI from 10.45 million to 10,668,760, which is significantly higher than the gross potential income that's ever been reported at the subject property. The county, although we think they made an overestimation in their test column for gross potential income, they did make appropriate adjustments to operating expenses in their test column. You can see that over the course of the last 4 years, the operating expenses have been fairly consistent. 32% in 22 and 23 has been the expense rate, increased to 37% in 2024. Operating expenses went down from 3.6 million in 24 to 3.5 million in calendar year 2025, or 35.5% of effective gross income. The county's test column revised their operating expenses from 34% to 35.3%, which is in line with the most recent operating expenses that were reported in calendar year 2025. However, again, because the county increased their gross potential income in their test column to well above anything that's the property's ever been able to generate, the indication value recommended no change to the current assessment. If you apply, which we think is, the county was pretty close in their original assessment for gross potential income. If you apply their revised expense rate of 35.3% to column D, you get to a revised NOI of $6,425,858 and a revised assessment of $108,912,855, which I think should be at least a minimum of where the county or the board should consider the tax year 2026 assessment. With that, again, really what it comes down to is the operating expenses here. I think, the gross potential income adjustment in the county's test column. I think the county in their test column did make appropriate adjustments to operating expenses, but applied it to the wrong, incorrectly applied it to the test column instead of the original assessment. With that, I'll close and happy to answer any questions that the board has.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Shuttlesworth for the county, please.
Yes, good morning, board. Good morning, Mr. Warren. So this property is a high-rise style apartment built in 1967 with the effective age of 1999. This property was inspected in May this year. The amenities include community room, business center, outdoor swimming pool, micro market, and tot lot. So just last week, I presented very similar case to the board because we had to conduct reconstruction. One of the major issues on the appeal last week and this time around were the replacement costs. This time we also have received the actual rent information only. We had to do some calculation to extract the potential rent. These calculations can be found on page 7 of the BOE packet. I would strongly encourage the board to look at page 7. So the actual monthly rents figure provided to us were based off 325 units. This property has 362 units. Now the board can see towards the bottom of the page 7 the true potential rent. And as shown in our test column F, we underprojected our potential rent by almost $380,000. So I believe we were very conservative on our potential rent. And again, our potential figure projections are only they factor in 3% growth, which is consistent with what this property has demonstrated for the past 4 years. In respect to the operating expenses, just like last week, we had to reconstruct. We had to reconstruct 2024 and 2025, as the expenses reported included unallowable expenses, specifically replacement costs. The replacements costs are already factored into our cap rate at 0.2% rate. For 2024, we excluded over 83,000 worth of appliance replacements and over $87,000 for state income tax. For 2025, we had to reconstruct to exclude also over $80,000 of appliance replacement and over $192,000 for the carpet replacements. And we also excluded state income tax in the amount of almost $22,000. So that's why those reconstructions were performed. And they were also contesting the cap rates. Again, our cap rates were developed based on third quarter publications. These publications are provided on page 22 of the BOE packet. And with all that, I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? Mr. Pace.
This one's for Mr. Warren. Do you know if the appellant has any sizable expenses that they're looking to have in 2026 that would adjust their expense ratio?
Are you talking about typical operating expenses or CapEx?
That would affect the that would affect the expense ratio.
Again, their contracting costs have been increasing each year. Supplies and maintenance, labor costs have been increasing. So expenses aren't expected to decrease at all. And again, these costs that the county is trying to exclude, $192,000 for carpet replacements, those are typical unit turnover costs. I think we discussed this last week. They're not value add. They're not able to generate higher rents from these costs. It's necessary to maintain their rents to stay competitive in the market.
Okay. Other questions? No? Okay, Ms. Shuttlesworth, if you take a minute then to wrap up.
Thank you very much. So originally during 2026 valuation, we underprojected our potential rent. That's why we tested higher figure. This higher figure is still over almost $380,000 below of the true potential rent, as shown on our page 7. In respect to the replacement costs, there are not allowable costs. They factor into our cap rate. And regarding our OPEX, we tested OPEX at $9,869 per unit. That is higher what they originally reported in 2025. And again, the 2025 OPEX included those unallowable expenses. And lastly, our tested NOI is below the reconstructed 2025 NOI, and I asked the board to confirm the assessment of $111,101,200. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Warren, if you take a minute then to wrap up.
Again, just to repeat, 192,000 for carpet replacements are typical turnover costs that the client or that the owner incurs annually and can expect to incur annually moving forward as well. These, again, were not value add. They're typical turnover costs in order to maintain and stay competitive in the market and maintain rents. The county's gross potential income from the rent roll are saying, repeatedly saying that it's coming to a figure that's much higher than what was reported in 2025. Well, that does not consider any free rent concessions or employee quarters. So it's a gross number, not a net effective revenue figure for the rent, the gross potential rent of the apartment units. NOI, the county's reconstructed NOI is approximately $137,000 above what the property was able to achieve in 2025.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, thank you both. All right, it's just among the board. Where are folks? Mr. Mendez.
I think the main issue on appeal is the expenses, mainly the carpet replacement. And I hear what the appellant's saying, but if they choose to replace it annually, that's on them. I don't think that carpet necessarily needs to be replaced with every tenant. So I agree with the county as far as the, taking it out and their current assessment.
Okay, other folks? No,
I have no
Mr.
problem.
Penaranda?
I'm okay with the current assessment. I did a couple of tests using the test column and then increasing the expense, using the actual expenses, and the value comes up even a little higher than what the county has, and everything is very close. So I'm okay with the current assessment.
All right, anything different, Mr. Pace?
I think the county did really well on this. I think that the appellant has some issues that are worthy of them. I actually think that when I made my adjustments, I think that both the county and the appellant are incorrect. I actually think the income is going to go up, but I used a higher expense ratio because I'm and my adjustment was a slight decrease to what the county came up with. But if we have to vote between my number or the county, I'm comfortable with what the county came up with.
Okay, anything different, Mr. Yates?
No, I think the county is very reasonable in this. They got it. It actually is probably a little low.
Okay, all right, would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll
Mr.
go ahead and
Mendez?
move that
Yeah.
we confirm the assessment at 111,101,200.
Okay, we got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Mendez? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There are none. It's unanimous. The county is confirmed at 111,101,200. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And before we go
Thank you
back
all.
to Mr. Chikas and Mr. Harmon, I've been asked to take a break. So it's 10:24, so everybody take 5 minutes and we'll be back around 10:29. We'll wrap up the last two cases. Thank you. right, Rosa?
Yes, ma'am. We're back.
I believe we've got almost everybody. I don't see Silas yet.
Announcement is off, right? Break announcement is off. Okay.
I'm sorry?
I was sharing like a little brief
Yes,
break.
that's all. Mhm.
Slide. Okay.
Yes, I see Mr. Harmon and okay, we've got everybody back. Okay. All right, continuing on the agenda, the fifth case, RPC 18038020, the economic unit on North Courthouse Road. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the board. Chris, good morning. So this property is a 359,000 square foot building built in 1990. As of the date of value, the property was over 80% vacant. Now, I'm sure you've had a chance to review our grounds for appeal. Those begin on page 44 of the appeal pack. And just to give you some background context on this property, as we're all aware, we've seen this property over the past few years. They lost a major tenant a few years ago. That was the Koch Institute, moved down to Ballston. Since then, that coincided with the onset of work from home and the pandemic and all of that decimated the office market for Arlington County. This property has been poorly positioned. It's struggled to gain any traction with reaching anywhere close to a stabilized occupancy. The previous owner was also at the end of their 10-year hold period for this property, having purchased it in 2015. With those combined factors, you have a 80% vacant office building. You're at the end of your hold period. The previous owner began to market the property for sale beginning in November of 2024. They marketed it. You see the marketing materials. It says, oh, you can lease it back up, if the market turns around. Or you can apply for redevelopment as multifamily, or you can apply for this new adaptive reuse program. With that, the property was professionally marketed for the next 8 months and had a significant investor interest. The owners received exactly 20 bids on this property. So marketed for 8 months, received interest from 20 bidders. Of those 20 bids that were received, the seller accepted the best of them. That value was $32.4 million, and that property sold in July of 2025. You can see the details of the sale process as verified by the sale broker. That's on page 49 of the appeal. Now that sale price, $32.4 million, that contemplated the totality of the property. That contemplated the entire fee simple estate, the land, the improvements, all of the land value, all of the improvement value, and all of the rights that the new owner could potentially attain. This sale price represents a value per square foot of $90 a foot. Now, this isn't an outlier. This is in line with multiple other sales of high vacancy offices that were slated for redevelopment that all came in around $100 a foot. 4301 Fairfax sold for $98 a foot. 4601 Fairfax sold for $99 a foot. 4350 Fairfax sold at $101 a foot. All of these comps had high vacancy at sale, were intended for redevelopment, and were similarly situated to the subject property, which again sold in July of last year with interest from 20 bidders for $90 a foot. So that's in line with the market. It contemplated the entire bundle of goods that came along with ownership of this property. Compare that to the county's proposed revised assessed value, which is at $168 a foot. So not only is the recent sale at $90 a foot contemplating all of the rights of ownership of this property, which is in line with multiple other sales of similar properties, the assessor is proposing a value of $168 a foot. Now, let's put that in context. We know that high vacancy properties that are good candidates for redevelopment sell for around $100 a foot. Where is $168 as the assessor is proposing? Where does that fall in the market? Well, 1530 Wilson Boulevard in Roslyn sold in October of 2025 as an 83% occupied building. That property sold at $160 a foot. So the county's revision on this property, it's an 80% vacant, a dilapidated office building proposed for redevelopment. Similar properties sell at 100. This one sold at 90. An 83% occupied office building in Roslyn sold for $160 a foot. The county's proposed revision on this property is saying it's even better as a shell apartment building, which doesn't actually exist at the property, but they're assessing it as such. and the land value, it's better than an 83% occupied office building in Roslyn. So that kind of brackets the sale price for you. We have similar properties selling at 100 a foot. We have a stabilized office building in Roslyn sold at $160 a foot in October of last year. And then we have the assessment for this property at $168 per foot. Now that sale price from July of last year, $32.4 million, that's also in line if you take the county's income approach for this property last year, and all you do is you update it for the concessions that the county began recognizing in tax year 2026, and then update the cap rate to reflect the county's updated 2026 cap rates. Keep all the other variables the same, rents, occupancy, what have you. The value comes in at $36.3 million. So if this property, let me clarify, once they bought it for $32.4 million, the buyers were clearly valuing the value of the county's adaptive reuse program, which is a perfunctory 4 to 5 month abbreviated approval process. The goal is to remove office product and increase multifamily product. So the county adopted this adaptive reuse program, said, hey, it's a streamlined, cheap, quick, perfunctory approval. The buyer applied for and was granted that right after the sale. So the sale price was $32.4 million. If they hadn't gotten that adaptive reuse program, the county would have valued it via their income approach at $36.3 million. Instead, they got that adaptive reuse approval. The county's saying that adaptive reuse approval, the 4 to 5 month streamlined, limited fee schedule, they're saying it went from $32.4 million up to the proposed value of $60 million, over $60 million. So that streamlined adaptive reuse approval added $29 million to the value of this property. Logically, that's a tough pill to swallow. It just doesn't pass the smell test, as we've heard previously. Now, with this sale price, Virginia law is very clear. It states explicitly that a recent sale of a property is to be given substantial weight. The assessment did not give this sale any weight, which is in violation of that clear dictate by Virginia law. Now, the county does mention in their response that, there was something on CoStar about it being a short sale. All that means is you then have to verify the sale. There's nothing in appraisal practice or Virginia law or the Virginia Board of Equalization guidance that says if it says short sale anywhere, you disregard it. Instead, it says if it says short sale, you have to investigate what were the parameters of the sale, what were the fact patterns. Once you do that, you can see, as we've outlined on bullet point 5AI on page 44, that this property did meet the requirements as being indicative of fair market value. Now, it is necessary to verify these sales. The county does not appear to have made any effort to verify the sale. Instead, it seems that the county is adopting an approach of, we're just going to assess all of these adaptive reuse programs in the same manner. Now, this is a new program. This is the first go round that the assessors had at taking a stab at how do we value this. The issue is, out of the 5 adaptive reuse properties in the county, 3 of them sold in 2025. The county should have created their model from those 3 sales and came up with a methodology that gets closer to those sale values. In this case, this property did sell in an arm's length, widely marketed, competitively bid sale for $32.4 million. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chikas for the county, please.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, Jordan. So again, fairly well surmised by the appellant. But what we want to do is make sure that we are stating very clearly so that everybody fully understands. While there were 3 sales, every sale occurred prior to the approval of the adaptive reuse. So again, it started to sound like it was explained correctly that what was purchased in July of 2025 was a largely vacant office building in a market depressed of the office portfolio. $32,400,000, as was advertised by TransUnion, included in the flyer by the appellants. It clearly said the optionality was to maintain it as an office asset, convert it, or redevelop. So in other words, anything. There was no indication that this was going to be a redevelop. There was no indication that this was going to be an adaptive reuse. This was purchased as, again, a building with 3 tenants, 18% lease, so 82% vacant. In regards to the loan that was taken out in 2015, as was indicated in the same article talking about the short sale, it doesn't look like it was a purchase, but it was an $87 million loan that was taken out for redevelopment purposes, renovation purposes, a new lobby, amenities. They went through LEED certification in 2015. It was essentially value add. So that would indicate why the short sale would be where it is, as far as that the lender was willing to take less than the amount that was due. I think there was a claim that we had, made no efforts to reach out to the owners to investigate the short sale. On page 20 of 126 in your packet, you'll see a 3-page, I believe it's 3 pages, sales follow-up that we sent to the owner on July 6th of 2026, specifically asking about the sale itself, special factors, was a sale convenience, for sale, short sale, share sale, appraisals involved, property rented, leased, personal property included, recent changes to the property, zoning, change in use, etc. We did not hear back from the owners in regards to these questions requested. Again, we've been very consistent as far as how we value these, looking at what was approved as of January 1st by the enhanced legislative density approved by county board. That subsequent January 1st, we then value the property based on what was approved. So there's a little bit of doesn't quite work, the idea that this value of $32,400,000 should be representative of what came afterwards. The approval came after the sale. So obviously the sale does not indicate the approval, and therefore our assessment does not either. Because we've been consistent in valuing this property vis-a-vis what was approved, 296 units at $70,000 a unit, 4,065 square feet of office and or retail at $60 a square foot. That equated to $23,331,900. And our revised cost approach, recognizing the shell as a apartment, came out at $36,806,800, indicating a value of $60,138,700. I would like to yield the remaining of my time to Ms. Kelly and or Mr. Bailey.
Thank you. So the most important fact in the case, and I know that Chris already noted this, is that as of January 1, the property had received county approval for adaptive reuse. It was no longer merely a vacant office building. It was a vacant office building with approved rights to convert to 296 multi-units in a metro accessible location. Market value must reflect that legally approved rights attached to the property as a valuation date. And again, the marketing materials also distributed prior to the sale promoted the residential conversion and redevelopment opportunities, including potential densities up to 10 FAR. So the property was marketed as a redevelopment opportunity, not simply a stabilized office investment. The property received adaptive reuse approval after the sale and before the valuation date. The building itself may have been an obsolete building, but it was clearly valued as part of an approved adaptive reuse property, meaning that it still had value and it could be converted to a multifamily project. The county approved reuse of the structure rather than demolition. Conversion costs are real, but the market participants were aware of the costs of the conversion prior to the submitting for conversion using this the adaptive reuse project. The department's land value conclusion is not unique to the subject. When we compare the adaptive reuse projects, the resulting land value is remarkably consistent. For example, 3601 Wilson Boulevard and the subject 1320 North Courthouse Road and 2100 Crystal Drive all fall within a $62 to $64 square foot approval development, and that would be as office. The sale itself, when you look at the 32 million sale, it falls around 109,000 per unit when our values for apartments are at 78,000 per unit. So I don't want to mix up office rate versus how the property is valued as a existing multifamily, as approved as a multifamily project. I think that's all. As the July 1, 2025 sale occurred at approximately $90 per square foot. However, the property was specifically purchased specifically because of the redevelopment and adaptive reuse potential. I don't think I have anything else unless Mr. Bailey or Chris have something to respond to that.
I just want to add, I think we've been trying to discuss or explain this throughout all these cases. This is different from a site plan because the building structure itself, meaning the framing, the garage, the elevator shaft, is going to be maintained when they redevelop this building. So we're not comparing this to 4.1 site plans because those are seen as land value sales only. We know based on the sales that we see that the sales prices came in much higher than the land value. We're not using those sales prices to change our land value. We're looking at these as adaptive reuse only. And we think it's important that you realize the columns, the concrete, the transportation cost to bring this material in. This is the savings. This is the cost savings aspect. So this is the value add of these properties when you look at adaptive reuse. I think my time's up. Thank you.
Still had a minute.
We'll just wait for questions then.
You're muted, Mary.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, questions from board members. Mr. Mendez.
Yeah, for the department, was this appellant like made aware of the way that these properties were going to be assessed the following year before moving forward with the adaptive reuse, or is that something that kind of came down the line?
We don't have interaction or conversations with property owners when they're going through the development process. They speak to the CPHD. Our job is to assess the properties based on like site plan approvals, current uses, income, so forth. We do the income approach, sales comparison approach, and cost approach. We did decide last year when we saw more of these properties being approved that they were different from site plans because they're retaining the building. We know based on Virginia code, we do need to apply value to the improvement if it's going to be on the property as of January 1. And so the decision to value on cost approach was made last year prior to the assessments coming out. As Chris stated, some properties we didn't get a chance to value them. That's just the honest way to put it. So we had to do on motions and put the cost value on there.
So just to clarify, was it public information, or could they have easily found out that the property would be valued this way by the department prior to July 2025 is when it looks like November 2025 when they were approved for this adaptive reuse? Was that public information, or is that just something that came out later on after they had been approved for that adaptive reuse?
Our
In other words,
guidelines
could they anticipate the cost of what their tax bill could be?
Our guidelines are composed during that time period, and we publish them around January, February, around when the assessments come out. So that information was available in the guidelines when we published them for the public to see. As far as the cost approach, like we said, there is another property right behind Bosman. It's Arlington Courthouse Suites. That property is valued on the cost approach. I'm not sure if the appellants or the agents who have presented today represent that property or not, but that is a property that we value on the cost approach. I think we said earlier we had conversations with the property owners, JBG, and the new property owners for the hotels, and we stated to them that we're valuing the properties on the cost approach because, again, these buildings are being repurposed and not demolished. So therefore, the cost approach was the best approach to use. The income approach is not appropriate because there's no income being generated for these buildings as office buildings.
If I may, Mr. Mendez, I just want to add on, I can't speak for Mr. Harmon. He can testify if I'm incorrect, but I don't believe he and I have spoken this past year, but I know for a fact we've had other representation reach out and ask hypotheticals. What happens if this happens? What happens if you guys do this? So while we don't have necessarily a public relations effort that goes out in December each year talking about what's changed for January, we're literally here 365 days a year, every day to answer emails, phone calls, etc. As far as any changes each year.
Okay. All right. Other questions? No? Okay, Mr. Chikas, if you take a minute then to wrap up.
Yes, ma'am. So again, just keeping equity with all of the other five properties valued as of January 1st, 2026 for adaptive reuse. We valued the land, recognizing the land rates that were in effect January 1st, in this case, $70,000 a unit for market rate, high-rise metro accessible multifamily, $60 a square foot for metro accessible office and metro accessible retail. We then depreciated the existing improvements to apartment shell, recognizing the approval that happens after the sale date, but prior to the January 1st, 2026 assessment. Therefore, we do ask the board to recognize our proposed revised estimate of value of $60,138,700. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute then to wrap up, please.
Yes, thank you. So this property again sold July of last year, $32.4 million. Then the only change between that sale and the first of 2026, this perfunctory adaptive reuse approval. The county is essentially stating that that approval added $28 million in value to this property from the time of sale after it had been professionally marketed for 8 months, received significant interest from potential buyers, 20 bids. The best bid, the highest bid said $32.4 million. They go out, they get this streamlined approval. It took 4 months, 4.5 months to get it. It's, the county states it on their website. It's, hey, give us these properties, we'll approve them. And the county now is saying that added $28 million to the value. If that's the case, why wouldn't the seller have just delayed the sale by 4 months, gotten that approval, and sold it for another $28 million? It's because that's not the way it works in the market. That perfunctory approval process, that streamlined approval process, doesn't really add that much value to the property. As we heard from the EVP of development at JBG Smith earlier, the value of converting this shell, or this existing office building to apartment shell, is eaten up by the costs to get there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bill. All right, it's just among the board. Go ahead, Mr. Mendez.
Yeah, I mean, I have sympathy for the appellant. I mean, it just feels like they got approved for a site plan. They're doing a good thing. They're adding inventory to the market that really needs it, but then they're just getting, assessed at almost double what they paid for it. So if I were the appellant, I would assume that I would get a tax bill somewhere based on that 32 million, maybe a little bit higher sales price, certainly not double. So I'm with the appellant on this one.
Right. I guess my only thought on that is these are not folks who aren't involved in development. I mean, they know how site plans work. I get the difference between the adaptive reuse, that they're keeping the building, but even just looking at what the proposed land values were for last year. I mean, just roughly, I'm looking 21, 43, 45,000 or 45 million is in the land. So it didn't all of a sudden go down. And this is similar to a site plan in that we do have to value it with any rights that are attached to it. And the rights that are attached to it is to reuse it as this new parcel. So, from a standpoint of equalization, I just don't see where all of a sudden it just drops down to, like Mr. Penaranda said, somebody, purchases it for a lower amount than what's already on there. I mean, the value is still there. It's a cost of developing it. Yes, sir. Mr. Mendez.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we say the buyer got a deal on a property, but this is now a majority of these cases that we have heard today that have sold well below what they're assessed for. So I understand what you're saying, but the whatever way they're using to assess it is just too high based on what we've seen today.
And I understand where you're going, but by just going to the sales price, we're not taking a look at what the total value of the property is worth and or the additional rights that are approved with this development. So I guess it's just, we'll have to agree to disagree. I see where you're at, but I don't think that it's properly assessing it. Other folks? Mr. Yates?
Well, I looked at it with replacing the existing building value with what the sale price was, and then add your $70 or $60 $60 a foot or $60 for the units. But, the problem with that is I can't apply that same rule to the other ones that we've looked at.
Mhm.
It's closer on this one, but the others at $8 million or $6 million for existing building, it doesn't apply. So if we're doing, I think the county should be looking at this to encourage the development a little different, as I've said, but I don't see how I change from what we're doing. This is what the rule, this is the way they've written the guidelines.
Okay, Mr. Penaranda?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Mr. Mendez if there was no change in the use of it, but I disagree with Mr. Harmon that says, just because it took 4 months, they could have adopted another plan to even expedite for, I don't know, a month or 2 months. It still changes the use and what they can do with it and the rights to it. So I'm the same as the previous cases. I'm okay with the county.
All right, Mr. Pace, where are you?
I mean, I think there's a massive flaw with this way of evaluating reuse. So I would not be
Okay.
voting with the county.
All right, so we certainly don't want it to revert back to the original. So, Mr. Yates, are you okay with the proposed?
Yes, and I have to say that I disagree with where the county's doing it, but it is what is stated. And they have not proven the county did it incorrect. And I think that's just what it comes to. They county did what they're supposed to do. Do I think they're right in it? No, but they did what they were supposed to.
And
All right,
I
then
will,
I'm going,
I,
go.
I'm just gonna say, I think developers are watching this, and I think in the next few years, their behaviors with the reuse projects in Arlington are gonna change based on how
Yep.
these are going.
Yep.
And that may be the case. Okay, I'm going to move to accept the county's revised proposal of $60,138,700. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, motion and a second by Mr. Penaranda. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's 3-2 without Mr. Pace and Mr. Mendez. The county's proposed assessment of $60,138,700 has been confirmed. Okay, and that brings us to the last case with the same folks. RPC 14046-025, property located at 4100 Fairfax Drive. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes on this property.
Yes, thank you. So I do want to start a little bit of a different tact. I usually save this for the end of my presentations, but I do want to address the equity. This is how we always do it. This is what our guidelines say. The county guidelines are made up by the county assessor. These are not, brought down from the Temple Mount. These are not enshrined in appraisal practice. These are what they come up with. On these adaptive reuse projects, they've taken several different valuation approaches to get to where they are today. There was an initial assessed value, then there was an own motion to update it to assess it as apartment land with office improvements, which by definition is in violation of generally accepted appraisal practice. So just keep that in mind. And they've since adjusted it to say apartment land with a depreciated apartment land with depreciated apartment improvements. No such apartment improvements exist at these properties. So, take the guidelines with a grain of salt. They're made by humans in the assessor's office. They're not necessarily in accordance with appraisal practice. Assessing properties as apartment land with office improvements is by definition invalid. That's just against the principle of consistent use in appraisal practice. Now, this new approach, assessing it as apartment land with a depreciated apartment shell, that doesn't exist at the property. The cost to get it to depreciated apartment shell is going to cost as much as the value of the contributory value of that apartment shell. So, this whole statement of, well, this is just how we do it, they've done it 3 different ways. Each one has been flawed. it seems like, it's kind of grasping at straws. How can we do this? How can we do this? And the result is, as we've seen from the sales, values that come in significantly higher that are valuing this adaptive reuse program, which is a streamlined, supposed to be quicker, cheaper, 4 to 5 months instead of 2 years, 100,000 in fees instead of 2 million, no required architectural designs to be submitted and approved and all of that back and forth, quicker, cheaper, all of a sudden just quadruples the values of these properties. That just doesn't hold water. It's not grounded in assessment practice, appraisal practice. It's not grounded in Virginia law. It's made up. Yes, they write that we'll use a cost approach at times in the guidelines, but take that with a grain of salt. That is according to the assessors. We've all heard 2 wrongs don't make a right. In this case, 5 wrongs certainly don't make a right. And, it does deserve to be corrected. With that, I'll just refer to the Virginia Constitution, Article 10, Section 2. All assessments of real estate shall be at their fair market value. Now, there are instances such as these properties that we're hearing today where fair market value, as indicated by recent sales, is in conflict with what the assessor has said is equitable, is uniform. Well, what do we do then? Do we just defer to the assessor saying, hey, it has to be equitable? After all, this is a board of equalization. That's our primary goal. Well, we have guidance on that. The Supreme Court of Virginia has contemplated this, deliberated it, thought upon it, and issued guidance on what to do when fair market value, which is the ultimate goal, and uniformity are in conflict. They can't both be achieved. And with that, the Supreme Court has routinely said fair market value takes precedence. In the Board of Supervisors versus Donatelli and Klein, the Supreme Court said the preference for uniformity must stop short of assessment at greater than fair market value. That cannot be more clear. That is what they call a black letter law. There's no ambiguity there. It is, as written, no legal interpretation required. The preference for uniformity must stop short of assessment at greater than fair market value. Further, the Supreme Court has said it seems logical to give fair market value priority to the extent that uniformity and fair market value cannot both be accomplished in an assessment. So this is settled. It's black letter law. There is no ambiguity. There is no interpretation needed. So, just keep that in mind. The guidelines, they do say we'll use a cost approach every now and then. The county has actually applied that 3 different methods of applying that so far this year. The current assessment on this property is apartment land, depreciated apartment shell. No apartment shell exists at this property. It is a fully built out office building. It still has office tenants in it. That's an interesting point too, because we've heard the county testify that when there are existing leases at a property that is scheduled for redevelopment, that lowers the value at sale. The county testified to that for 4420 Fairfax. They said there's an Arlington County school lease there for 2 years. That's why the sale price is lower. That impacts the sale price. In this case, this property has, I believe, a decent amount of current occupancy, 33% occupied. Some of these leases run through 2028, 2029. The county, in their own words, says that reduces the value on sale. Here, there's no such acknowledgement of that testimony. Now, this property, if you go back to the county's 2025 assessment using the income approach, you adjust it to reflect the county's 2026 concessions rate, 2026 cap rate. And if you'll recall, this property was in distress because they had that 90,000 square foot tenant vacating in February of last year. The board ruled after the date of value, even though it was widely known in the market, we'll consider that the next year. This property did lose that tenant. So if you do the county's 2025 income approach, just to give you, and this is appraisal practice too, you're supposed to do all 3 methods when developing an appraised value. And the reason is it kind of triangulates to make sure your value's in line with where it should be. So if you do an income approach, use the county's assumptions that they used on the 2025 assessment, update the cap rate, update the concessions, update the vacancy, you get to a value of $30 million. $30 million based on this property as an operating office building, which as it stood, it is an operating office building on the first of the year with entitlements to convert should they choose to. So the primary issue with the county's, way they've chosen to look at this property is apartment land with depreciated apartment shell is, again, there's no depreciated apartment shell on the property. That's where the value issue comes in. If you take off the value of those improvements, you get much closer to where that income approach would indicate the value should be. And that makes sense. We're trying to triangulate. So those two values kind of line up. So the issue, and again, we heard this from the executive vice president of JBG Development. That's one of the largest developers in the market. And this lines up with what researching conversions online says. The cost can retrofit and convert an existing office building to multifamily eats up any contributory value of, the windows or the steel frame or the concrete. This is why you don't see that many of these projects in the county. None have been completed. More likely, projects are knocking down buildings. You look at 3033 Wilson or Clarendon right there in Clarendon, they chose to knock it down. They did the math. They said, at the end of the day, it's going to cost me the same amount to convert an office as it is to tear it down and build up a new one. And I'm going to be left with an apartment building that looks like an office building. It's not going to be as pretty. It's not going to gain the same amount of rents. So for that reason, we request the board reduce the assessment as set forth in the appeal to more closely reflect the sale
Time's
comps
up.
and the property as it stood on the first of the year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cheekis for the county?
Yes, ma'am. So I guess that was a bit rambling, so I'm not sure as far as which argument to dispute. In this case, we don't have a sale, so there's nothing really to look at as far as the change in market value other than the request by the owner in July of 2025 to receive approval for adaptive reuse from a vacant office, as testified by the appellant, to a high-rise mixed-use multifamily, 269 metro accessible units and 6,079 square feet of retail. Again, as we've done consistently with all other the other 4 adaptive reuse properties, all as of January 1, 2026, we applied market rate land values of $78,000 a unit for the market rate high-rise metro accessible multifamily land and $60 a square foot for the metro accessible retail land. Again, we revised our cost approach, as was mentioned by Mr. Harmon. I don't believe we took 5 attempts at it, but rather 3. One was testified by Mr. Bailey himself that as of January 1st, 2026, we didn't have improvements valued by our cost estimator. So therefore, we imputed $1,000 interim improvements. We corrected that through an own motion. That was an incorrect own motion in the sense that we valued it at that point as an office shell. We did recognize that and valued it for our reassessment for our revision as a depreciated apartment multifamily shell. This has been consistent with how we've done all of the properties except for the first case, in which case we value that as a existing hotel shell. We'll talk a little bit about that in the remaining 6 minutes I have. But again, when we talked about, we heard testimony that there should have been 3 approaches to value. When we look through the appellant's package, we don't see any approaches to value. He didn't indicate an income approach. He didn't indicate a sales comparison, neither a cost approach to value. So as far as the reflection of their opinion of value of $25,394,800, it's not actually espoused upon as how it got there. Ours is clear cut. We recognize again the land value. We recognize the revised estimated cost for the materials being used and the labor rates for Northern Virginia, depreciated to recognize the age of the property itself. That came up with a revised value of $58,667,200. That is what we asked the board to recognize as far as our proposed revised amount. Do want to yield some time to Mr. Baylor and Ms. Kelly as far as any other additional comments.
Mr. Harmon spoke to consistent use. I just want to talk about that for a second. The land value here, we are valuing based on, we're using the same, we're using a multifamily land rate, and we have stripped the office building and converted it to an apartment. We're valuing based on an apartment use. So there isn't any inconsistencies with how we're treating the apartment, what's approved as an apartment for the land, as well as the apartment. I did want to also note that, again, this was, the county did approve this adaptive reuse for mixed use development with 269 units. This was after, this was as of the date of value for January 1. That didn't include some retail space. We are not valuing residential land and unrelated office building. We are valuing using a similar to an economic unit where they're both valued similarly, meaning that the residential development is also using a residential structure, residential land. It does contain the parking garage. Like these are components that do that are consistent with I'm sorry, let me just start over. The benefit, there's a lot of benefit to the adaptive reuse program, and Mr. Harmon noted that it was a perfunctory program. I just want to note, because we haven't really talked about the difference between the two. What they get in adaptive reuse is an existing structure. It doesn't, there is no demolition. It accelerates the delivery of the housing. It relies on already existing building shell, requires less time to market, more time, reduces entitlement uncertainty, and reduces the environment of demolition and reconstruction. And it also allows for them to recoup their monies more quickly. For a traditional 4.1, the existing structure is usually demolished. New building designs have to come from scratch. It does take a process that's multiple years, and it does involve a review process. So this process does actually allow for the new owner to capitalize more quickly. The process is more streamlined. So the benefit is more upfront. And so when we are valuing the property, we're looking at how the property sits. We do recognize that it's no longer an office building, that it is now a residential property. So we have changed the value of the land from office land to residential. We have changed the value. We're no longer valuing the office structure. We're valuing it as a residential structure, which is consistent. So the benefit is there. The benefit is on the front side. On the back side, the county is responsible for valuing the property as it was approved. This was approved for 269 units. And so therefore we valued it as 269 units as a residential property, I don't really have anything else to say. I know I went pretty quickly, but if you want to jump in and say anything else, Chris, to that.
No, I think, Mr. Bailey.
I wanted to kind of also continue our conversation about how this compares to a 4.1 site plan. So this office building was being purchased and demoed for land, and we would therefore have that $1,000 improvement because we know the property is going to be demolished. Once that construction would start, we would value the newly developed or the apartment under construction on the cost approach. This property has already got a head start because they don't have to do any demolition. They don't have to do any excavation. They don't have to pour the concrete and build the garage. They don't have to do the framing. All of that is already there. So when you look at it, this would be treated as probably a 30% complete apartment building. So when you look at comparison to how we treat site plans and adaptive reuse, again, you have one property under construction. We would say this is the cost approach. It's about 30% complete. This is a building that doesn't have to undergo that construction, and we're valuing it as a shell condition, and it's depreciated based on the year built to account for the age of that framing and concrete. That is all. Thank you.
And I just want to note that these were based on conversations that we've had for previous cases where we recognized that we needed to reflect the year built versus the effective age. So we have continuously made adjustments to the process to ensure that we were, one, treating everything consistently, but we were also acknowledging the fact that these properties are consistent, are similar to site plans, but however, they have we are using a cost approach to recognize the structure that still remains. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? And I feel like I should have asked this at the beginning of case one, but I'm going to ask Mr. Chikas, can you tell me where specifically in the code it says that you can assess a property based on the future improvements?
In this, probably not. You probably need at least a couple minutes. I can do that if you want to We can take that time.
I can tell you where it says that. It doesn't say that.
We're not comfortable with that response, so if we
Okay.
can research
Well,
it for
I'll
you.
give you a couple minutes then. It seems like since this is the basis of the county's position, we should know this.
And I don't know if Mr. Bailey or Ms. Kelly wants to jump in, but I think just to be clear, we're not assessing future benefits. We're assessing what was approved. So that the structure that's being assessed is physically there as of January 1. There's no future elements that we're adding to that.
Right, but where I'm going with this is we're kind of piggybacking this on how we overall do site plan approvals and why this is going to open up a whole new can of worms. But what I'm reading, it says real estate assessors must evaluate the fair market value of land along with any existing physical buildings or structural improvements to that property. However, assessing the projected value of unbuilt improvements merely because they appear on approved site plan before construction or substantial completion occurs violates the legal rights to base assessments on present fair market value. So I realize this is opening a huge can of worms, but since, we've been told for years that we evaluate site plans just to be equalized and whatnot with what the future value is. And the same thing, we're kind of adapting part of this in this adaptive reuse. We're taking out the existing building and saying, oh, well, we can move forward on this because of the fact that it's the future use. But I just want to see where in the code it gives the county the authority to assess
Yes,
that way.
ma'am. What was the code you were just quoting? What was that subsection?
58.1, 32.80.
I think this would be more so under highest and best use, and the highest and best use is based on the approval to adapt to an apartment by the county board. And again, we're not valuing the property's income potential off of a future use. We're valuing the structure of the building. It's a vacant building. We're valuing the structure of the building on the cost approach, and it's a depreciated cost. So it's not really valuing it on the potential use. Is the approval to convert it to an apartment. We're valuing it on the premise of this building being in shell condition as opposed to a completed apartment building.
I hear what you're saying. I'm confused where it says you have the ability to do it. I just further fine-tuned my inquiry here to Arlington County, and here's what comes up. In Arlington County, the development of real estate assessments is bound by the exact same Virginia constitutional statutory rules outlined previously. They cannot assess the value of unbuilt physical improvements simply because a commercial project has been approved via the Arlington County site plan review process. So this is, like I said, a can of worms on all of these cases, but you're telling us that you have the ability to do it. I'm just asking, can you show me where you have the ability to do this?
Well, the only thing that we've done, and it's just as you noted, Mary, was that we're recognizing that the property has an existing shell. And so we are costing out that shell, and we have stripped everything else away from that property besides the elevator shaft and the sprinkler system. And what if it had an existing garage? So we're not valuing the future use. We have since acknowledged the fact that it's no longer valued as office, if that's what you mean. It has been approved for an apartment use. So in that instance, we have changed the land rate and we're valuing it as an apartment shell, but we're not valuing using the income approach. We're simply costing the property as it sits as of January 1.
Okay. Other questions? Mr. Chicas is looking up. Yes, Mr. Mendez.
Yeah, for the department, do you mind telling me how much this property would be valued at if it were just a regular 4.1 site plan? Is it that total land plus 1,000, or is there a different, is there anything different?
It would be the land rate, and it would be, we would probably recognize 1,000, but that would be just to recognize that there's a structure there to be demolished. This property is not being demolished.
Okay, so it would be 21,347,700 if it were just a 4.1 site plan.
If it was a 4-point site plan, recognizing that the current improvements were to be torn down for the
Right.
redevelopment for the new.
That's correct,
Okay, thank
Mr.
you.
Mendez.
I apologize, Madam Chairwoman, I'm probably gonna need more time. It's a bit arcane following the codes.
Mary, this is Derek DeBay, the assessor. I think that's something that we're gonna have to follow up with, providing you information on, as we're not gonna be able to pull that right now to give you information on our response to your request at this time.
Okay,
And we'd be happy to postpone until we get and allow the county to research that. I don't think they're going to be able to find anything in the code that supports their methodology. And that would benefit our client to have that on the record.
You could postpone it, it's fine. We will be able to provide information. It might be something specifically listed in the code that's gonna address the
Okay.
information, but in conferring with the county attorney and ourselves and our approach, we'll be able to provide more information to you.
okay, because this also impacts the other 5 cases that we've heard. And so what I think in the best interest of being the fairest, and I believe we've got some of the appellants still on the line here. I'm going to go ahead as chair and make the decision to, to postpone it. We'll vote on that. However, depending on what that answer is, if it is something that supports Mr. Herman's case on this, then having prevailed or having voted on the prevailing side of the previous 5 cases, I would want to recall those.
Understood.
Okay. Okay, then I'm gonna move to postpone. Let's see here. We've got we can postpone this. We've got a very light agenda on Wednesday, the 19th. Which would give you more than ample opportunity to review the code and do that. So we will move this to the 18th, or I'm sorry, Wednesday, the 19th, to allow the county to be able to find where in the code that, we're doing this properly. So that being said, I'm going to make the motion, as I said, to postpone. Do I have a second to postpone it? Okay, Mr. Mendez, all in favor of postponing this to the 19th, say aye. And opposed? I'm sorry. Okay, so Jose, you're opposed to it? Correct?
You're on
You're
mute.
Sorry, yes, I am.
Okay. All right. With the exception of Mr. Penaranda, it has been voted to and accepted to postpone case 14-046025 until Wednesday, August 19th. But I would appreciate if you could go ahead and send that information to me prior to, so we can see where we're going with that. Okay.
Yeah, and if we may request that you provide us what you're asking for in writing to help us understand exactly what you're asking for, that'll help.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll print it out and email it to you. Okay. I assume, Mr. Harmon, that you're okay with that.
Yeah, that's fine. We're
Okay.
trying to get to the fair market value, so anything we can do to do that.
Okay. All right. Well, then that completes today's agenda. Does anybody have any other business before us? No. Okay, then we will stand adjourned at 11:23. Reconvene tomorrow, August 12th, in person at 9 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you all.